Lovely. Good evening. A warm welcome to those attending this evening's Pensions Committee meeting and also to those watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. My name is Councillor Rita Chundell and I will be chairing this meeting. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible online underneath the live broadcast. At the end of the public part of the meeting, the committee will move to discuss any confidential matters. The live broadcast on YouTube will then be cut and any members of the public present in the room will be asked to leave. Just a few housekeeping rules. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. Also, a polite reminder to please switch off any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts. Online housekeeping. Some important online housekeeping for those attending via MS Teams. Please ensure any mobile phones around you are on silent. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking. Only one person may speak at a time, and then I, as chairman, will call those to speak. Finally, a reminder to anyone speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if your microphone is switched on. So, just before we start the meeting, I would like to just have a quick introduction so everybody knows who we are, obviously being as a new chairman. So we'll start from my left, please.
Andy Evans, Corporate Director of Finance for Hillingdon. James Lake, Director of Pensions, Treasury and Statutory Accounts.
Councillor Cawthorne, Substitute Member.
Councillor Stuart Mathers.
Councillor Tony Bowles.
Carl Pereira.
Marion George, the Independent Advisor.
Andrew Singh from ISIO, we provide investment advice to the fund.
Jack Francis Kent, Principal Internal Auditor and Pension Board Member.
Anisha Tedji, Democratic Services.
Thank you. A warm welcome to Marion, part of our team, so welcome and hope you'll have a long, successful time with us. Oh, Andrew, sorry. And I would just like to say thank you to Councillor Stuart Mathers for doing a stellar job as chairman, and I'm really pleased that you're staying on the committee to obviously to support myself and the committee itself. So thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 1. Apologies for absence, please.
Apologies from Councillor Banerjee with Councillor Cawthorne substituting.
Okay, agenda item 2, declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Do we have any? No? Okay. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting 26th of March 2024 and the 9th of May 2024. Do we have any amendments to the meeting or? No? Okay. So just to confirm, the items marked part 1 will be considered in public and those marked part 2 will be considered in private. So that's items 5 through to 10 will be considered in public, and then we will switch off the YouTube channel and consider parts 11 and 12 in private. Okay. So, agenda item 5, administration report. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This item introduces the Hampshire Annual Report for 23-24. Copies were emailed directly to members and are on the members' shared drive. In terms of the Hampshire report, a meeting was held with Andy, our Corporate Director of Finance, along with Rob Carr, his equivalent at Hampshire, along with other senior officers to go through the annual check and challenge to ensure everything is on track and working smoothly. The report was also taken to Pensions Board in May, where it was discussed again in great detail with Andy Lowe, who's on the call today. In summary, 23-24 has been another successful partnership with the teams working together well. In this regard, I really think it is a partnership. Actually, both teams do really get on and work well collaboratively together. Hampshire are an extension of the team, basically. Service delivery has been first class. Hampshire remain proactive in terms of keeping ahead of the game, especially in the world of cyber security and the pensions dashboard. with that, only positive things to say in terms of the annual report and the relationship and service received from Hampshire. So happy to hand back for any questions, and obviously we've got Andy on the call should committee want to speak to Andy at Hampshire directly.
Thank you, James. Well, it's pleasing to hear that we have a really good working partnership with Hampshire and ourselves, and long may it continue. Any questions from the floor? Lovely. Councillor Cawthorne.
Observation and a question, if I may, because I chaired this committee for quite a long time, until 2 or 3 years ago, and I would say that it's really encouraging to hear what we are, because this has a bit of a history, and I'm looking at James, and James will remember very well what I'm talking about, won't you, James, in terms of how this was working in the past with the previous provider. It's really good that this has settled down, that people are getting statements when they should, because and other services which are important to recipients of this. So really good to note. No, that's all. It isn't really a question, just an observation, really. So what I'm taking from this is we're in a much better place now, which is good.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andy, for your continued work with your team in providing that consistency that Councillor Cawthorne spoke about. My one question was, in terms of the member portal registrations, do we feel we're starting to get to that point where the curve is becoming very flat, or and what else might be done to just make sure it continues on the rise? Because I think the plan is that at some point in the future it would be 100%. And we're not quite halfway, and I know it's one of many things that you do, but it'd be useful to get a sense of how much we can expect to jump over the coming year.
I think there will be a natural continuation upwards in port registrations, primarily because new starters to the scheme at Hillingdon and new pensioners at Hillingdon will be encouraged, asked to register online as part of that process. So there's a natural way of attracting new portal registrations through that BAU business of new starters and leavers. So that will continue to tick up. I guess the bit that may not change much will be your existing pensioner cohort, those that have not yet logged onto the portal. We've had a few discussions with James about that. We're not sure it's an area that you should be overly concerned about. I just gave you a very good, very quick anecdotal one. My dad's a pensioner. He's got access to a portal with his pension provider, which is a fire service. He'll never log on. All he needs to know is that his salary goes in, or his pension goes into his bank account every month, and he's very happy. So he will not be accessing the portal, and that'll be the same for a lot of older pensioners who've been just used to receiving their pension month by month. So it will tick up for those reasons I set out. It's ticked up again in the first part of this year, and I think we'll just see that continued upward trend.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Cawthorne.
Sorry, I perhaps should have said this at the beginning. I've overlooked the fact in the past we used to have to declare if we were deferred members. I am actually a deferred member. Is there still a requirement to do so? Because if there is, then I need to do that, and I should have done it before. So I've overlooked that.
Are you on the register, Councillor Cawthorne? Do you register on your register of interests?
I'm not sure. I would need to check that, to be honest. I mean, I'm one of a number of elected members who are deferred members of the pension scheme. I don't remember ever declaring that. I need to check that out. It occurred to me that I should perhaps mention it now. I beg your pardon for not doing so before.
Okay.
I don't think there is actually. I mean, traditionally we have declared that, all councillors have declared that as an interest, but I don't think actually officially it's necessary, because it is just part of your package, I guess. So I don't think there is a need to do it officially, but we have done traditionally.
Okay,
just in terms of that.
That's good enough. Fair enough. Thank you.
And I just wanted to add something on the membership as well, just to say in terms of active members, again, we'll be sending out the annual benefit statements in August, so again, there'll be another drive to push active members to sign up to the portal. We'll be doing all staff emails and sort of the chief executive's news as well. I'll get him to sort of add that into his weekly newsletter as well. So, and the team as well, Sebi, who works works for our team, he's actually contacted a lot of the people in the scheme directly and sort of saying you should sign up. So we are doing lots of active work in terms of active members as well.
Councillor Mathers.
Sorry, Chair, just to follow up on what James has said. We know that we sometimes get a slow response from other employers, and rather than the burden being on the council so much, is there a way in which, as part of the agreements we have, we can get more communication out through other employers within the pension fund to encourage sign-up? And are there particular, you don't have to mention the names, but are there particular employers who have a low sign-up that it may be worth targeting?
I'm not sure we've done the analysis per employer to sort of see where that trend lies per employer, so that's something maybe we'd need to look into.
Andy, I'm probably one of these people that don't log online to check the pensions because it's just tedious for myself. So is there anything that you can do to drive the change in behaviours?
Sorry, was that to me, Chair?
Yes, sorry Andy, yes it was.
Yeah, apologies. And I was going to add that we do send out regular communications to all employers, so we can certainly work with James around putting in some wording specifically for the Hillingdon employers around encouraging the portal sign-up, if that would be helpful.
Any further questions on this? Yep. Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to add a couple of comments to what James said earlier from coming out of the meeting. I think when you've got a good level of performance like that, there is, you might suspect there could be a danger of complacency, but we're certainly not seeing any signs of that. We had a very good meeting, went through a comprehensive range of issues, including participation of Hampshire in benchmarking exercises to measure their performance against their counterparts. So they're doing all the right things in striving to improve performance further in specific areas, customer service, for example. So we covered all those areas. I think you'll see in the report very good progress against the backlog cases, which is one of the reasons why we changed provider relatively recently, and we're undertaking some joint actions to deal with the remaining cases where there's certainly some issues and barriers to making progress which are sort of not directly within the control of either Hillingdon or Hampshire. But I just wanted to give that reassurance about the strive and the motivation to improve performance further, despite the really good outcomes and KPIs that you're seeing already.
Lovely, thank you. Andy, that's very pleasing to hear. Because when you look at our historic leavers and the number of cases to be cleared, it's just leaving 871 from quite a four-figure number. So, well done, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? No? So shall we move swiftly on to the next agenda? Oh, Andy, would you like to? You can stay if you like, or you can go.
I shall take my leave if that's okay, Chair.
All right, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your meeting. Thanks. Bye.
Right, so moving swiftly on to agenda item 6. James again.
Thank you, Chair. This report covers both the 22-23 results and the 23-24 audit plan. It was taken and presented by EY at Audit Committee as the committee charged with governance, and this is subsequently brought to Pensions Committee for noting at this stage. Since the Pension Fund draft audit results report was taken to Audit Committee in April, 2 of the outstanding items relating to the going concern and membership numbers have been cleared. This only leaves the partner review and final check and sign-off of the accounts with the management representation letter to be added at this stage. For the benefit of non-Audit Committee members and to give some brief overview, in the world of public sector audit, currently there is a national backlog with hundreds of audits outstanding, some going back to 15-16. The government has tabled a plan to resolve the backlog and take steps to improve the timeliness going forward. This was sent out for consultation. They were considering the responses. Obviously, now we're in the election. We're not sure where that's sitting on their agenda, but I imagine it's not sitting on their agenda at all at the moment. But it's with them to consider responses. and we're working now with EY in terms of the outcomes of that consultation and how we take the next steps. Currently the report states the accounts give a true and fair view and have been prepared in accordance with the relevant guidance. So in terms of that, it's a relatively clean audit report. 23-24 audit plan sets out materiality limits and areas of audit focus which are not materially different from last year. The audit timetable aims to have the audit completed by the end of November 24 at this stage. The plan is pretty much business as usual for the pension fund. So, happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? No? Okay. We're happy to have that noted. Yeah. So just to confirm, we'll just note the resolution that the audits, we're happy with the audit outcomes. Okay, lovely. Right, moving swiftly on to agenda item 7. James again.
The funding level has improved by 7% over the quarter, reaching 114% on the interim valuation. The asset value increased by 109 million to 1.357 billion. However, committee should note 45 million was due to the Richmond College merger and the addition of assets which were transferred over to us. Nevertheless, a large increase mainly on the back of improved inflation and interest rate expectations. Performance linked to that was obviously positive, with the quarter returns of 4.77% and 1-year returns of 11.48%. However, we always try and focus on the longer term returns, which show 3- and 5-year returns at 4.54% and 4.68% respectively. These are both above the all-important benchmark of 4.1%, the return set by the actuary and is included in the funding strategy statement. So positive in that regard. In terms of fund manager performance, M&G, Adam Street, LGT and Macquarie show large divergences, but this is because the funds are winding down and they have very little value left. So in terms of their actual attribution or contribution towards the return, they have minimal impact. The two other managers that stand out, the active LSIV Paris Aligned Equity Fund and the LSIV Absolute Return Fund, continue to be a drag on performance. Again, though, we need to be mindful of their overall impact as they're only sort of 5% each. We have discussed these managers previously and the observations remain the same. However, should we want to discuss this further, maybe we can do this as a part 2 item. Otherwise, happy to answer any questions.
Lovely. Yes, James, I'd like to discuss the 2 funds, but we'll do that in part 2 in more detail. Any questions? Councillor Cawthorne.
Yes, I mean, did I hear correctly that it was 114% funding level? Because that's a funding level I'm not used to hearing, to be honest with you.
It's changed a lot, hasn't it?
It has indeed. I should step down from committees more often, shouldn't I? Just one question, really, if it's appropriate in this stage around performance management then. So there's reference in one of these paragraphs, they're not numbered, but to underperformance that's occurring. And you use the expression of being wound down. Does that mean that those assets will be reallocated? Or so I just understand what you mean by that?
Yep, a lot of the funds, we make an allocation, so they're private market investments. So we will say we're going to invest £50 million, then for example, over a period of time that gets drawn down and invested, and then those investments get paid back with a profit on top. So things like infrastructure or private debt, for example, where you've lent companies money and then they give it back. So your investment's getting smaller and smaller as the money gets paid back from the fund. So when we say wound down, we're saying that the fund allocation is getting paid back to us. So we've done an investment, it's been paid back to us, and there's very few left. So there might be one loan left on a private debt, there might be one asset that needs to be sold on an infrastructure or something like that. Or the private equity, you've sold off most of the companies now, you may have one left that you need to just sell off. So the investments are very small, and so that's when we say wound down. The big investment's been invested, and it's been paid back effectively. Thank you.
Just one more for me.
Sorry, Councillor Cawthorne. Microphone.
Beg your pardon. Thank you. In relation to the London Civ, so this was instituted in my time, and it was certainly quite an unwieldy group of multiple local authorities, all investing in infrastructure at the behest of the government, of course. I just wonder how it's working in sort of 2 or 3 more years in terms of the sort of handle we have on how it's working and how we manage performance. Because it was challenging at the time. Is it any better now?
Yeah, I think initially it was the first ever pool, I believe, and it was trying to find its feet. And as you say, there were lots of different authorities with different agendas, and I think it was growing as a pool and trying to understand itself. And we had lots of issues with governance as well. When Councillor Goddard was chair as well, we made a decision as a committee to sort of say, actually, we're not investing anything in the pool until you improve your governance, which they took note of, and they implemented all the changes we requested. And the CIV's moved on leaps and bounds now, I would say. It's got a new chief executive who's got a completely different outlook. He's much more sort of client-focused, sales-focused, I would say. The CIV has grown, so their governance is better, the ESG is better, their selection of funds is better. So the whole situation with the CIV is completely turned around now, and it's a much more positive environment, and they're treating us more like, we're owners, but we're getting more customer, we're getting more value added, for example. So we're going to them, we're getting them to do extra work on top of just managing the funds. So it's a completely different relationship to what it was 3-4 years ago.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. If I just may add to that, I think that the journey we're on with LCIV is one where we're encouraged to pool, and we want to pool, and they are now working as much as possible to make pooling as cheap as possible for us and to add on extras. So, for example, some of the environmental reporting now they're starting to offer for free. What we're trying to do is, I would suggest as a fund, is to maximise not just our performance of investments, but also the way in which LCIV can save the money that they're designed to do from their inception. We have spoken at length on them with the 2 funds that aren't performing, or particularly one of the funds that hasn't been performing, and we're getting more and more knowledge, and we're providing more and more friendly critique in how they may want to refine some of the processes and access to information they have in order to performance manage on our behalf. I think we're more encouraged by the kind of fund of funds that they're bringing in, where there's a number of funders within one of their funds rather than a fund to an individual fund manager, because that obviously creates greater risk for us, but also means that fund is reliant on that one fund manager, and I think for me that doesn't create enough opportunity for accountability. So we know them better, they've changed a lot, and I think they're trying to do things for us on multiple levels: performance, savings and efficiencies. Okay.
I think in part, Marion.
There, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that your approach to the CIV, which is to be collaborative and try and work in partnership, is the best way forward. It means that they listen to you, as Councillor Mathers has just said, and, for example, are in the process of developing an alternative equity product that has been at your request, along with another borough, and that means that I think you will get the most in the future out of the pool, rather than some funds that are less collaborative.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Hi, just one comment from me on the funding level. I know we touched on this slightly earlier. We could talk about it more in part 2, but just to remind the committee, when we looked at the last formal strategy review, so we tend to review the actual strategic asset allocation once every 3 years. The funding level at that point was 87%, so that's around the March 22 point on that chart on page 102. So obviously really great news that it's come up to 114%, and James touched on it earlier, but that's driven by the market conditions since the date of the valuation of the strategy review, so it's been really favourable. So equities and growth type assets held up really well, and we've seen interest rates continue to come up, and Q1 in particular was kind of an epitome of that we've seen since the valuation. So really good result for the fund.
James.
So I just for complete transparency as well, the interest rate environment, so the rate at which they discount the liabilities is higher in the current environment because interest rates are higher. So our liabilities have gone down. So it's not just the fact that our assets have gone up, it's the fact that because of the high interest rate, the higher discount rate, our liabilities are pushed down a lot more as well. So that's added to the funding position being the way it is at the moment.
Councillor Bowles.
And just follow on to the question Councillor Cawthorne asked. The communication is so much better. And it's very much a two-way communication with the pool. I mean, we get lots of stuff from them, and they seem to listen to us as well. Whereas I don't think that was always the case in the past. But they definitely, even down to doing coffee with the CEO every week. They've really improved their PR and their communication side of things.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, that's pleasing to hear that we are moving in the right direction. I think in part 2 we will talk a little bit more detail just about how the markets are performing, just to give us a little bit of reassurance, and obviously, for our benefactors as well. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 8. James or Tunde? James?
Me for everything.
Okay.
Here we have the usual information which shows voting on the active managers and examples of ESG initiatives and engagement by ELSIV, LGIM and LAP. This is an information report for noting, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions? No? Yep, Councillor Mathers.
Sorry, Chair. Not a question or comment necessarily. We had in a training session before from LGIM around their voting records and bits and pieces, which we see presented here, and we know that we can access things online. I just wondered, I'm trying to think when the anniversary of when LAFT were here last, and if maybe we want to invite them, particularly as newer members who haven't met them, to present and to talk a little bit about what they do at a future meeting.
Yep, we're happy to organise that, and I can ask Tunde to speak with LAP, and we can arrange it, check with members' availability, so whether that's pre-committee or we put something as a teams meeting at some point, so we can reach out to LAP and try and get the ball rolling on that, if that's what committee want.
Be happy with that, committee? Yep. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you. Just looking at this report, I'm wondering really about how shareholder activism works now, because it's something that we've never wanted to tie the hands of our fund managers, but we always wanted to encourage them to exercise the right sort of judgments where it was appropriate. And I wonder how we manage that balance now. I mean, are we back in LAPFF now? Because I thought we were out of it for a while. Thank you. Cheers.
Yep, 1 year ago, committee decided to rejoin LAF, just to improve, I guess, our lobbying and try and sort of push the agenda again in terms of sort of ESG activism. So that as a stand aside, but we do ESG's, I guess, really sort of raised the bar. ELSIV do an awful lot of engagement. They have an engagement partner as well, and they do all the voting. We've heard from LGIM just now, and it's very much core to what they do as a fund manager, and they've got all of our index funds. So that's very much part of it. LAP feed into ELSIV. So ELSIV have their own team. They have another team. And LAP feed into that, so they will take on board what LAP say, what EOS say, who are their partners, and what their own governance team or ESG team think of a thing, and then they will vote according to what ELSIV think is the best thing. And the same with LGIM. LGIM will take on board what LAP say, but they will still, their voting will be driven by what LGIM want to do, but they'll take on the views. It's just information. Okay, this is information from LAP, this is information from X, this is information from Y. What are we going to do? Okay, and we'll vote like this. So that's how it's sort of incorporated at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Bells.
Thank you. And once again, following on from the previous question, LAP are very communicative with us. You know, we get regular updates from them, and it's all very open and clear. And I think some of the problems from the past have disappeared now, and we've got a good relationship with them. So it's all positive.
Any further questions? I'm just going to go back to item 7 just to note that the committee notes the funding and performance update. Thank you. And then if we have no more questions on agenda item 8, it's recommended the Pensions Committee that we note the fund manager's ESG activities and compliance efforts, and we note the LAP activities. Are we happy? Yep. Okay. Lovely. Okay. Agenda item 9. James.
Thank you, Chair. There are currently 14 risks on the risk register with no changes from the previous quarter. I would like to update the committee that going forward I'll be using the Council's new risk management system, JCAD, to record and monitor risks. This should prove more efficient than the current sort of spreadsheet approach that we use. One feature I do like about JCAD is the fact that you can, or the option you can tolerate and retire a risk, but you can still see it in the background. So you've still got a record of the risk, but because there are systems in place to manage the risk as part of business as usual, you can remove it from the actual active risk register. Now, we could apply this to a number of the current risks. I've highlighted as an example in the report that pensioners living longer. Yes, we know it's a risk, but we're not sort of poring over it every 2 minutes saying, what are we going to do about pensioners living longer? We've got mechanisms in place, and it's fairly static in that regard. So that's a risk that we could retire or tolerate. And when I actually look at the risk register, I think we could possibly do the same with risks 1 to 11, actually, in that regard, as their management is business as usual. Whereas maybe perhaps risks 12 to 14, we are looking at these regularly, and they are sort of more current active risks that we're concerned about. So when I bring the new reporting back in September and highlight where risks have been considered to be retired, we can all sort of discuss that and make sure everybody's happy that the approach we're taking on the 14 risks that we've got, and if we can retire the first 11 and keep the subsequent sort of 3 as being active. So I'll bring that back, but yeah, just wanted to highlight that committee, and obviously highlight the fact that we've got the current risk register. Another thing I just wanted to mention was in terms of the hard work of Hampshire officers and Hillingdon officers, we've seen a big improvement in terms of employer performance, which directly relates to PEN 14, the risk of employers delivering accurate and timely information. We will get the annual return official benchmarking, hopefully for September. But on average, we've seen a 50% uptick in the timeliness of annual returns. So again, that's a sort of positive impact, but indicates sort of this is a risk that we are managing because we're talking to these employers, we're sending them communications all the time. So that's probably one we should keep active. But again, just positive in terms of the results or the early indications for this year.
Questions? Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. With the changing of the asset allocations and the transitions between the two, we know that we've got some funds, I use the word retiring, and we're moving things. I just wondered if that impacted the assessment on kind of liquidity and for us to be able to pay, obviously, our pensioners and other aspects when it comes to transition.
It won't impact the liquidity at all. I mean, this is, in terms of moving from one system to the other system, we can still see the risk, we'll still have it there, but making sure we've got money in the bank to pay pensioners is our day job. You know, it's a risk, but but that's something that we make sure we're on top of. So therefore, do we need to have it on the risk register? Probably not, because it's business as usual. If that makes
Sorry,
sense.
if I just may clarify. No, so my point was that, yes, I understand that risk, but because we've been moving large transactions to different types of assets, and we know that we're coming out of one and going into another, whether that impacted on that risk. I mean, I totally agree with having them sit in the background, the majority of our risk, because I think that's right. It's part of the control measures are sufficient, but I wondered, in having changed things over the last 3 months and potentially over the next 3 months, if that had a greater impact or not? Thank you, James.
No, I would say no, because in terms of how we pay pensioners, generally we're sort of cash flow neutral, possibly slightly down at the moment because we haven't had the pension increase for employers yet. But so what comes into the fund is enough to pay pensioners out of the fund. And we have a number of liquid assets, so we always look at the liquidity of the fund. So in terms of moving money from where it's coming from, we've got liquidity in our funds to actually dissolve them and get the money in T plus 2 days, so trade plus 2 days. So we can get money if we need it ever to sort of dissolve any money out of the funds. And we could also, even if we wanted to, we're not at that stage yet, but we could have some of the returns, say for property or some of the gilts, for example, to have the yield or the dividends paid back to us as a return as opposed to reinvested in the fund. So if we needed to, we could also have distributing funds instead of accumulating funds, so funds that distribute the dividends and the coupons on bonds, etc., paid back to us as opposed to just reinvested. So we're always mindful of that when we're looking at investment allocations. And always say to Andrew, right, where are we going to pay for this? Where's the money coming from in terms of moving those assets about? Because we do have timing differences in terms of some of those allocations as well. So we do look at that, and we do manage that.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Yeah, I'll just briefly expand on what I think James covered most of what I was going to say. But if we think back to when we last reviewed the strategy, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was exactly as James described. So the contributions coming in and the pensions going out, there was a slight deficit there, so small kind of single-digit million numbers from memory. But if you account for the strategy is purposely designed to be diversified and have some assets that produce income, so if you account for those, so the things like property, infrastructure, credit, that actually more than fills the gap. And as James says, the issue then becomes, is there a timing issue? So do you have to disinvest to cover before you get the income? And there's a bit of that going on, but if there's a balance kept in the trustee bank account, that usually more than helps with that dynamic.
Councillor Cawthorne.
I think Andrew might have just touched on this, but just for my benefit, I wonder where we are with the revaluation cycle, the triennial one, and the investment strategy. Is it fairly recent that that's been completed? Thank you.
There was a 2022 valuation, and then the strategy has been in place now from sort of 23, and the new contribution rates were from April 23. So we've agreed the strategy. We just need to implement some of those changes, which we'll get on in part 2, because there's a couple of funds. So there's the equity value fund, which we're looking at, and the property transactions, which we're also looking at, but we'll discuss that in part 2.
Sure, thank you.
I've got a quick question just around 13, succession planning. So where are you at the moment, James?
We have got a small team and we've got a specialist team, but I'm working with Tundi to sort of help train up Tundi in terms of my succession planning. Tundi has got a new trainee pension fund accountant, Carl. Who was it? Yep. So Tundi is trying to train up Carl, or Tundi is training up Carl in terms of pension fund accounting, succession, and we've got Sebi, who's our technical pensions officer, and he's training up someone called Ian, who's sort of trying to pick up from that. So there is work in place in terms of succession planning, but again, just it is still a small team, so there is that key officer risk around that, but we are working towards that.
Lovely. That was my concern, being a small team and being very specialised, that we've got the right people in the right places at all times. But if we're working towards it, we can review that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a risk because, yeah, it is a small team and it is specialised, but we're trying to address that as best we can with the resources we've got.
Any further questions? No? Okay, so moving on to agenda item 10.
Here we have the governance update with the newly named continuous professional development update as opposed to the training log. As a reminder, the committee did agree to the training policy and the training plan, so I wanted to highlight some gaps still. After the knowledge and skills assessment, committee said they would look at some of the areas where maybe their scores needed to be improved. Only Councillor Bowles has confirmed he's revisited the Aon sessions following that assessment. All other members, with the exception of the Chair, are requested to provide an update, please. In addition, Councillor Riley is yet to confirm he's completed his initial run-through of the training sessions, and these are now overdue. So I just wanted to sort of put that on record. As usual, we have the work plan, which sets out the future items for discussion. I'm happy to add any which committee feel are missing. And the last item is to highlight a recent consultation letter sent to Andy from DLUC. And it asks for an update from funds on their current pooling, so how much they've got pooled, plans for future pooling and when they'll be fully pooled, the efficiency and governance of our pool, so ALSIV in our case, and what efficiencies could be achieved by combining funds. As you can imagine, the latter, combining funds, has caused a considerable reaction amongst, well, especially London authorities. Andy's discussed at the Society of London Treasurers, and I think we're all looking to sort of prepare a sort of a joint response. I'll be discussing at the Officer Investment Group this Friday with LSIV, who will be there, and the Scheme Advisory Board. I just wanted to highlight that as part of it, but I just wondered, Chair, perhaps we could discuss that as part of the investment pooling in part 2 as well, that conversation. But otherwise, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, yeah, no, definitely discuss that in part 2. Any questions? Councillor Cawthorne.
I can't resist it, can I? I'm just conscious that on this committee we have named substitutes now, and I'm one of them. So I think there are others too. Should we be on here for this activity, or just as a question?
Ideally, yep, all substitutes should have training as well. So I'm more than happy if Democratic Services and the committee are happy that, yeah, I send the training out to all the substitutes as well. So that would be a positive step forward and something I would recommend if committee substitutes are happy to undertake that additional training.
I've done all kinds of things, but not for some years, so it wouldn't be a bad thing, really. Yeah.
No, totally agree. If you're substituting for a specialised field, then I think we should be skilled in some shape or form. Any further questions? No? So, just as a recommendation that the committee notes the dates of the Pension Committee meetings, which are 25th of September 2024, 10th of December 2024 and the 26th of March 2025. And that we make suggestions for any future agenda items and the reviews which we can discuss either in part as and when. And that we note the committee's continuous professional development update, which we've done, and note the general governance issues, which we have done. Are we all happy and agreed on this? Agreed. Yep, great, lovely. Okay, so that therefore now, we've now finished the public part of the meeting. This committee will shortly move to a private session to discuss matters that are confidential in nature. The YouTube broadcast will come to an end, and we kindly ask any members of the public present to leave the room. And thank you for those attending and watching online. Thank you.